Good afternoon, my beautiful babes and babettes. This looks backwards to me. Hopefully it looks forwards to you. And you can get one too. Hopefully, where you live, either now or soon. Everyone in my audience should be smart enough to get one of these. I hope. Okay, going back on my desk. On an alternate note, I am your resident active advocate, and today I would like to talk to you about Brave. I would also like to apologize for yesterday because life was not happening yesterday. It was not a good day to be alive if you were me. Headaches, bad, barometric pressure, ow. But today, Brave. It's not bad, but what I specifically want to talk about is Brave and feminism. Rather than talking about the story itself, I want to talk about some themes that I observed in the story while watching the movie for the first time earlier this afternoon. So this was my first go with this movie. If I were to watch it again, I would probably see different things. But as I see it, there are two different kinds of feminism being represented here. I want to make very clear to my audience right from the get-go, feminism is not just one thing. Nothing in the world is just one thing, okay? I've talked to you before about the master status narrative, which is to define a person or a thing, mostly a person though, by one singular trait. If we do that for narratives as well, we are going to tie those narratives up in knots, and we're not going to be able to use them to their fullest potential. So when it comes to feminism, there are many, 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 many different streams that you can take. There are many, many, many different ways you can look at it, both as an insider and as an outsider. I consider myself a feminist, okay? Just right off the hop, I want to say that. I consider myself a feminist, and I act accordingly. I am one kind of feminist. You may be another kind of feminist, or you may not be a feminist at all. I don't mind. It's up to you. But in this movie, there are two different kinds of feminist narratives that I would like to discuss. The first is that of Merida, the princess, and the second is that of her mother, Eleanor. So, for Merida, she is what you might look upon as the more millennial feminist. The free spirit, the one who's trying to find her own identity separate from that of her family, of, in this case, her clan. And she is the one who goes out to do the traditionally masculine things. She's a tomboy. She's a fiery redhead. Almost everyone in this movie has red hair, though, so don't take that too literally, because, the narrative behind the redhead is that they are fiery, that they have hot tempers, also that they are untrustworthy, which doesn't play into this narrative at all, thankfully. That was more of an old-timey stereotype, but nowadays it's more about the fiery temper or the, succumbing to your passions. And I don't get how the color of your hair dictates that. I'm a brunette. We're supposed to be boring. Do you find me boring? I don't find me boring. Thank you. But Merida is the kind of feminist who goes off, does her own thing, wants to find her own way on her own terms, and seeks to move outside of the traditional role assigned to her sex and gender. Her mother, Eleanor, lies more within the traditional bounds of, the role set up for her sex and gender. But I would also argue for Eleanor being a feminist. Why? Because she is my favorite character in this movie. She is among the strongest characters in this movie, if not the strongest. Towards the beginning, you see a bunch of the clan leaders, and I'll explain a little bit of history here, but in a minute. You see all of the clan leaders having an argument amongst themselves, and Eleanor comes in the room, head up, very dignified, very noble, and they shut up. She doesn't have to say a word. She just walks to the front of the room, and they all stop fighting. Fergus, her husband, is not incompetent. Okay, I want to put across that he is not incompetent. I like Furious because he's a very supportive father figure, but he can't get these people to stop fighting because he's fighting with them. Quite frankly, he kind of lets his dignity as a king go and starts fighting with and for and among the clan leaders. And it's because of that that no one really listens to him, because he's a fighter too. Whereas Eleanor fights in a different sort of way. She fights using her presence, not her muscles. As I say, she doesn't even have to say a word for these people to stop fighting amongst themselves and be like, my lady, my queen, I feel so horrible, please forgive us, all this stuff, that they are willing to put aside their differences in the presence of a woman with that much presence. And really, the best we can ask of our best people is that they fight using their brain, not their brawn. That's what Eleanor does. She doesn't even have to open her mouth for these people to know that she means business. You don't have to raise a hand. You don't have to open your mouth. You don't have to argue back to know that you mean business, and for other people to know that you mean business. The best that we can do, really, is just to show that we have integrity and that we will not budge. So that kind of feminism I also very much admire, even though she stays within the confines of the traditional gender roles for her sex. I want to make a distinction here. Sex and gender are two different things. These are not binaries. These are two separate things. Sex is what you are biologically. Gender is how you conform to what you were assigned biologically. For example, I am a cisgender female. Cisgender meaning that I identify with the biological sex I was assigned at birth. I identify as female. Cisgender being the opposite of transgender, so someone who does not identify as the sex they were assigned at birth. And then you get a whole spectrum of stuff in between. It's not just a dichotomy. It's not one or the other. You get a whole spectrum of stuff in between. And that also applies to your gender role. I have a habit of presenting physically feminine, okay? I have long hair. I have rather small, delicate features, but I'm just a physically small person. I'm only 5'1" if I were to stand up, right? But I am mouthy, I am loud, I am bossy. You could say that those are feminine traits too. But I am authoritative, which is not usually considered a feminine trait. I am intelligent, which is a feminine trait, but traditionally in the West, the men were considered the intellectuals. All right? What I like about this movie, to get off me, what I like about this movie is that it goes outside of the binary and says that you can be all of these things and it doesn't matter who you are. That's sort of the subtext that is offered by Eleanor, and she doesn't even have to say a word to do it. I love that. The only thing I don't really like Eleanor for is that she does push Merida to conform to Eleanor's kind of feminism, which is not a bad kind of feminism, but it's not Merida's feminism. Merida is the one who wants to ride off into the sunset on her horse and shoot her bow, ping, as she goes. She's a master archer, and that's a very, very difficult skill to develop, okay? I might be good at shooting things in Legend of Zelda when I play that game. I cannot shoot a bow in real life. I've never even tried. And it looks hard. Harder than shooting a gun, by the way, because it would take much more dexterity. I don't recommend you try either on another living being, but that's just me. I'm very anti-violence. Getting back to Merida, though, because of the constraints her mother puts on her, she and her mother have a gap between them in terms of their relationship, and the entire narrative of the movie is them reconciling that gap and seeing through one another's eyes. This is a very classic Disney narrative, the protagonist and the arguable, but she's really not, antagonist are supposed to learn from one another and, see through one another's eyes. You get this narrative all over the place. It's not just Disney. But the whole thing about, I need this perspective in order to fill this gap that I have. And they both have something to learn from the other. Eleanor, arguably, I would not argue this, but the movie argued this. Eleanor arguably needs to learn to loosen up, whereas Merida arguably needs to learn to show more dignity. I like both brands of feminism, by the way, but personally, I'm more in line with Eleanor's because I don't have a lot of this. I have a lot of this. I'm good with the clevers. I am not good with the clobbers. Even though I'm a pretty good southpaw. Left-handed, love it. So Brave and the feminist narrative, it actually does a very good job of showing both sides. But as I say, this is not a rigid dichotomy. There's lots and lots of different kinds of feminism. For example, feminism, true feminism, lies in doing what you want to do as a woman, as a man, as anyone in between, or on no recognized spectrum at all. As long as what you are doing is not imposed upon you from without, it can be considered feminist. And yes, that does include staying home and making babies and making cookies. It does include those things. No true feminist, I know this is no true Scotsman fallacy, haha, pun on the movie. No true feminist would say that that is not feminism. Because every feminist wants to be open, really, to every other kind of feminist, which is what the two of these main characters have to learn in this movie. They have to learn to open up to one another's perspectives, and for them to see both as valid. So Merida arguably needs to learn some dignity. Whereas Eleanor arguably, again, I would not argue this, needs to learn how to loosen up. But different kinds of feminism don't have to clash. In order to really spread the narratives, plural, I think it is best when they work in harmony with one another, rather than saying, no, mine's better, no, mine's better, no, mine's better, no, mine's better. We shouldn't do that to one another, because we're all fighting for the same thing, which is sex and gender equality. And that doesn't just apply to cisgender females either. I would say that also applies to anyone on any sex or gender spectrum. You see this term online, TERF, TERF. That means trans exclusive radical feminist. I am not a TERF, okay? I am what I would call a TIRF, TIRF, trans inclusive radical feminist. And while I would advocate for everyone to be such, I can't say that that is going to be right for you. I can't say that that's going to be wrong for you. Everyone needs to make up their own mind about every political issue. I will not impose my own views on other people. I can say this is what I like, but I'm not going to say that this is right for everyone. Because morally, socially, politically, I am rather a relativist. And I don't have a problem with that. I know people who do have problems with that. I don't have a problem with relativism. What works for me is not going to work for you, because we're not the same person. And that's not exactly the lesson of this movie. This movie is more along the lines of, yeah, we should try and reconcile our differences and try to learn how to see it from the other person's perspective. Whereas, I'm kind of advocating for the opposite, really, of, live and let live, instead of impose. So the reason, by the way, why I didn't talk about the story in this movie is because I find it kind of weak. There are some accurate mythological aspects in this movie, to Scotland, to the Celts. I don't know, though, historically, whether they would have gone up against the Vikings and the Romans at the same time. I do, however, know, And anyone in my audience who has Scottish blood in them, myself included, a little bit, a drop, they were strong enough to keep the Romans out. Emperor Hadrian, of Roman descent, built what was called Hadrian's Wall between Scotland and the rest of, the British Isles. But it wasn't to keep the Scots in, it was to keep the Romans out. He wanted to protect his own people. He built that wall and basically said, if you are a Roman citizen and you go beyond that wall, may the gods help you. You are beyond my jurisdiction. I will not send people after you. You're going to get killed. Have fun. And that's how strong some of my ancestors were. Woot, woot. I also say this for the benefit of my lovely advisor who will be watching this video because she is half Scots. And I was tempted to do the entire video in a strong Scottish brogue, but it wouldn't have worked. I wouldn't have been able to do it consistently and it would have gotten really annoying anyway. So that is my Scottish brogue for you. And that is Brave. And I kind of wanted to sing the song, but now I sort of forget it. The lullaby. That's the last line. Disney, don't sue. I just really like that song. And yeah, that is my video for today. As I said, sorry about yesterday. Yesterday was not happening. But I will see y'all tomorrow for another movie. I forget what we're doing, but I have the master list. Woohoo! All right. Have a lovely day. Get vaccinated for the love of the gods. If you have not been vaccinated, do it. Do it. Do it. You have a choice. Your choice is to do it. Okay. Goodbye. Mwah. Bye.